She was on the banks of the river when we first saw her. She couldn't have been 20 years old. We thought it was a little strange to see her like that, sitting alone in the wilderness. But we figured it wasn't entirely uncommon either. I mean, we too were on vacation from the Ukraine, enjoying adventure and wilderness tourism. Russia is well known for it, and it's a popular pastime for young people in our country. Lake Baikal was not too far away, and it's a great place for hiking. It was August, and the weather was warm. She wasn't entirely out of place. What we did find kind of strange, though, was that when we said hello to her, she didn't respond to us. She didn't even acknowledge our presence at all, just kept this strange blank stare while we passed by her in our kayaks. We continued on down the river, but something instinctively persuaded us to turn back to see if she was okay. When we found her again, she didn't speak. So we had no way of knowing what kind of horror she had just witnessed only 4 days before.
When you hear about missing hikers in Russian mountains, you're probably thinking about the Dyatlov Pass mystery that happened in the Ural Mountains in 1959. But you probably didn't realize that a similar incident happened in Siberia in 1993.
I first learned about this case from the Unsolved Mysteries subreddit, posted 2 years ago by user Zico76. The post was translated from a Russian website describing what happened based on the testimony of the sole survivor, a 17-year-old girl named Valentina Utochenko.
Most of what's available online is actually in Russian, so to research this, I had to use Google Translate a lot. And I know you guys absolutely love how I innocently mispronounce everything on this channel, and this video is going to be no different. This foray into the Russian language is going to be pure fan service for you guys, because not only do I not know what it says, but I don't know how to say it. So let's do this. The summer of 1993 started innocently enough for a group of young hikers who had traveled from Kazakhstan to Buryatia. They belonged to the Petropavlovsk Azimut Tour Club, and they had traveled to Siberia with the intention of hiking the Chamar-Duban Range, located south of Lake Baikal.
Lake Baikal is situated in a remote part of southern Siberia and is one of the Earth's oldest geographical features, at an estimated age of 25 to 30 million years old, and is the deepest lake on Earth. Each summer, hundreds of adventure tourists travel there for various activities such as hiking, boating, and kayaking. In the winter, the lake freezes over, with hiking and kayaking being replaced by dog sledding and cycling.
The party was led by 41-year-old professional climber Lyudmila Korovina.
The others in the group were Tatiana Filipenko, age 24, Victoria Zelezova, called Vika, age 16, Alexander Kristin, called Sasha, age 23, Denis Shvachkin, age 19, Timur Bapanov, age 15,
and the only survivor, Valentina Utochenko.
The hike started well. The first 2 days were uneventful, with the exception of a little rain. Along the way, they stopped to pick some golden root as they made their way towards the midpoint of their U-shaped route. Their plan was to rendezvous with Lyudmila's 16-year-old daughter, who was also in the area leading a separate hiking group. From that point, both parties were to travel together into Siludinka, where they would complete their journey.
Lyudmila had checked the weather reports before starting the journey and determined that the weather should stay mild for their trek up the mountain. Little did they know that the day after they left, an extreme weather event was forming that would drastically change the conditions the hikers were depending on to stay safe.
By the third day, the rain turned into a harrowing snowstorm, with temperatures dropping below freezing.
Most sources blame a Mongolian cyclone, but I bet that it was the remnants of Typhoon Robin, which had made its way across the Russian Far East, causing wind, rain, and snowstorms. Investigators had to piece together what actually happened to the group based only on the vague testimony of Valentina.
On the 4th of August, we came to Krutsoy Pass. We descended in the afternoon. The group was passing through a treeless alpine zone. We made food on a kerosene stove. Around 1600 hours, we were making our way to Tritran's Hill. Heavy rainfall and cold. We stopped on a treeless hill, erected 2 tents. At 4 in the the morning, the tent's ropes snapped. We fixed them. At 6, the stake was torn from the ground, sleeping bags wet. 5th of August, 10 in the morning. Kristen came and said they're wet and freezing. It was snowing, no landmarks in sight. We packed our things and started descending in one line. After 10 meters, Kristen fell. We helped him up. He fell again. Korovina came to him. She told the rest of us to go down. Almost immediately, she stopped us and asked someone to come get her. Tanya unpacked a tent and the rest used it to cover themselves. I went up to Korovina. Sasha's eyes were huge. His gaze was apathetic. Korovina looked for a pulse and said his heart isn't beating. She asked me to get Vika down. I came up to her and she bit me. I dragged her back to the others. Tatiana started to hit her head on the rocks. Dennis hid behind some rocks and got into a sleeping bag. I crawled over to Korovina. She wasn't breathing. I tried to help Timur up. When I realized no one was moving, I went down to the trees. I put on more clothes and got in a sleeping bag and covered myself with a tent. In the morning, I went up, saw Tanya on the rocks. Dennis, Timur, Vika. Up higher were Sasha and Korovina. None of them rose again.
Other reports that I've read translated from Russian detail even more harrowing descriptions of the injuries that befell the hikers.
Sasha fell. Blood began to flow from his ears. Foam came from his mouth. Ludmilla had appointed Dennis the leader, and she said to go down as low as possible, but not to enter the forest. Then Vika, Tatiana, and Timur began to fall and roll on the ground, displaying symptoms like a choking person, grasping at their throats. Dennis said we should grab only the necessities and start running. I bent over my backpack to pull out the sleeping bag, and as I raised my head up to look at him, he fell to the ground and began tearing at his clothes. I tried to grab his hand and help him up, but he broke free and ran away.
Okay, then after that, Valentina ran further down the mountain to find shelter from the storm.
I spent the night under a boulder, hiding with my head in a sleeping bag. It was scary. Trees fell along the edge of the forest. In the morning, the wind died down more or less. At dawn, rose to a tragedy.
In the morning, Valentina had returned back to where she had left her friends, only to find that they had all perished during the night. She closed all of their eyes as a sign of respect and had the wherewithal to grab a map and a compass from the leader's body. She wandered for an additional 4 days, following old telephone lines, until she was eventually spotted by the Ukrainian kayakers. By the time a party of investigators had been organized to recover the hikers, the bodies had been lying on the mountain for almost a month. A month! What the
The bodies were already swollen. The eyes of all are completely devoured. Almost all the dead were dressed in thin leotards, with 3 barefoot. The leader lay on top of Alexandra. What happened on the plateau? Why, freezing, did the participants take off their shoes? Why did a woman lay on a dead man? Why didn't anyone use the sleeping bags? All these questions remained unanswered.
I've been looping footage from when the investigators finally arrived on the scene, but I chose to leave out the part where they show the bodies. It's pretty easy to find online if you know what to search for.
What stuck out to me about this footage was even though the faces were blurred out, some of the bodies seemed to be amazingly intact for having been exposed to the elements in the summer sun for over a month. I'm not a doctor, but if you know a thing or two about human decomposition, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. You have to tell me if this looks normal to you or not. I really don't understand how it would take a full month to put together a rescue crew to recover these bodies, and how after a month, scavenge animals hadn't picked the bodies clean.
If you're liking the video so far, make sure you hit subscribe and the notification bell now so you never miss another episode. And if you're interested, you can also support the channel by donating to my Patreon. The link is in the description below. The official autopsies concluded that the children all died of hypothermia and exposure, but Ludmilla died of a heart attack. they all were suffering from protein deficiency, which was chalked up to malnourishment. But when I heard this story, I couldn't help but think that there had to be something else. Details like foaming from the mouth, bleeding from the ears, didn't instantly strike me as symptoms of hypothermia. Neither did Valentina's testimony of the hikers grabbing at their throats for air, smashing their heads on rocks, and running away. Yeah, sure, they probably did succumb to hypothermia and exposure eventually, but what was it that made them initially freak the fuck out? It's hard to think Russia and not immediately imagine nuclear testing and the possibility that a yet-to-be-declassified incident could be somehow responsible for this.
Radiation poisoning could have caused the symptoms these hikers experienced. Radiation depletes the body of platelets, the parts of the blood that assist with clotting. An absence of platelets could have led to spontaneous bleeding from the nose, ears, gums, and other soft tissue areas. The children grasping at their throats could be attributed to ulcers developing in their esophagus, again a symptom of radiation poisoning.
Even their general malaise and fatigue due to a reduction in red blood cells could be caused by this, and led to the hikers being more susceptible to fainting.
The protein deficiency detail is interesting too, as many radiation therapy patients are instructed to consume extra protein-rich food because radiation literally breaks down proteins in your body and makes them useless.
The Belaya Air Force Base, which was located nearby in Irkutsk, was decommissioned a year later in 1994, but they had bomber squadrons stationed there that carried weapons with nuclear capabilities. Could the hikers have been accidentally exposed to radiation from a top-secret military accident? Some websites claim that the State Department interviewed Valentina after she was found and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement. Allegedly, she and the relatives of the deceased hikers were paid a large sum of money after the tragedy to stay quiet.
Another popular theory is that the hikers were somehow affected by the mysterious phenomenon of infrasound. Infrasound is a sound frequency that is lower than 20 Hz, which is considered the limit of human hearing. Humans cannot consciously perceive infrasound, but they can feel it. There's no agreement about the biological effects of infrasound on the body, but reported symptoms are incapacitation, nausea, vomiting, and bowel spasms. Also, a disruptive resonance in the inner organs, like the heart.
Infrasound can be generated by artificial things like nuclear detonations, but also natural means like earthquakes, severe weather, and lightning. Another possibility is the use of sonic weapons. These kinds of devices can destroy eardrums, causing bleeding from the ear, just like Valentina described in Sasha's last moments. Some sonic weapons are in development right now for use by the military and police for crowd control. A modern example of infrasound was in 2005 when the vessel Seaborne Spirit used a long-range acoustic device to deter pirates from chasing and attacking the ship. So this isn't some kind of science fiction weapon. It's real, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it could have been used in some kind of an experiment in Siberia in 1993.
The last theory is a little bit quirky. Remember the golden root that the group had been picking and drying? Well, the locals say you're not supposed to pick it.
Some people believe that some kind of elemental or nature spirit was responsible for the untimely and unusual death of the hikers as punishment for picking and taking this flower. Okay, so what do you guys think? I can't wait to hear your take on this strange story. You gotta tell me what else you find out about it online. And don't forget that I read your comments every week and I respond to my favorites on my vlog channel, Armoured Gregory.